Alright, we just have to move very quietly and we'll be able to leave quickly.
Monster, get him.
Monster, wait, I can explain.
Hey, hands off the merchandise.
Don't tell me he's selling his body again.
Okay, you don't gotta say it like that, alright?
He promised me his kidneys if he couldn't pay off his debt and his interests. And that's why I'm here to collect.
Willing to do desperate actions for your sick addictions, but not for roads, I see.
And I see you're still prioritizing your company over its leader.
Well, I'm not the one who has contributed to her abandonment issues and made her therapy bills skyrocket.
Don't worry, Kal'tsit. I'm 95% sure this procedure will kill him, as I'm just going to suck up the blood as my payments, and if he somehow survives that, the shock will probably off him as he can't afford anesthesia.
Oh no you don't, you can harvest his organs after I burn them to a crisp. Monster, get him.
You are not killing my greatest source of income. Crispy organs don't sell as well.
Okay, so I'm gonna use this as my chance to get away and... Come on! How can it breathe fire?
Now, are you going to be a good doctor and finally return to your duties as second in command?
Hey, whoa, what's with this second in command?
You are not about to claim primary leadership when you left us for over a year.
Well, while you were busy having dinner with the Pope, I was out having relations in other nations.
Don't you mean relations with other nations?
No, and laugh all you want, but your inability to take anything I say seriously is going to be your undoing.
I don't remember what you said 2 sentences ago.
And that will be your demise, for I said we just have to move.
Commander.
And I was wondering why I sensed a 300-pound metallic figure in the shape of a voluptuous woman along with your presence. I just thought you dropped it or something.
Holy is that a portable?
I'm gonna scrap it.
Like hell, I'll let you. This thing's leg has enough advanced tech for me to cancel the doctor's debt entirely.
Wait, what?
Oh yeah, give me her doc, and you're clean.
Okay, but I just have one thing I need to add. Can I keep the head? And after that, the decapitated android started fighting the eldritch abomination that comes from Kal'tsit's spine that we just never really questioned at this point. And here I have the head, so you mind repairing this for me, please?
Sure. Just give me a few weeks.
Thanks, Umama. Honestly, that solves my problems here, so I'm just gonna transition to my intro now. So, yeah, it's been a minute since I've made one of these, and in case you haven't noticed, the meta sure has changed in this game. A bunch of people have been asking me to update or remake or make a definitive version of my original video, so is that what I'm doing here today? No. While the original video is somewhat dated, I wouldn't say it's completely worthless now. Some of those operators are still absolutely broken even in today's meta, but the meta of 2023 is shifting constantly and will continue to shift with many of the powerful operators we're getting in future banners. So, what exactly is this video? Well, this video is just me talking about 10 more operators, which are not in my original video, that are also really good and influential in the game's current meta. I figured this was the best way to go about this video because do you really want to hear me talk about half of the same operators I've already reviewed a year ago, most of which didn't get any changes since then? Now, this video was the result of several months of planning, but I kept delaying it since a new banner would drop some new hotness each time I was gathering intel, so please keep in mind that this video, more than anything, is for entertainment purposes than as an actual guide as to what operators are really good that you should focus on. So for formatting, this video doesn't have a distinct order to it, but I have a natural flow that will make sense as we go along, and in terms of the information you'll see on screen, I'm going to talk about max level E2 stats and M3 skills to show the full power of these operators, but assume no potentials on screen as I'm not a whale. What's a better way to start off this list than with everybody's favorite American dessert? She's sweet as apple pie, it's time for Exusiai. Exu is your standard marksman sniper whose best trait lies in her third skill. Overloading mode is an auto charge skill that lets Exu's attacks hit 5 times, has a slight attack interval reduction, and each shot is buffed by 10% of her attack. Combo this with her skills and you see how Exu racks up damage quickly. Her first talent is a simple attack speed buff that gets stronger with more pots. Her second talent Angel's Blessing gives both Exu and a random operator deployed a slight attack and HP buff. On paper, Exu doesn't seem that interesting. Even with max trust and full pots, her attack barely goes over 650, which means that high defense enemies will shrug off her shots, right? But what if they don't have high defense? Well, we get what happened during the Gnosis event, where, thanks to a little setup, Exu was able to melt the boss. Even if you're not mowing down bosses, standard enemies will still have a hard time surviving a buffed Exu, hitting multiple times per second, with her talents and skills giving her buffs and higher attack. Now, I do want to talk about modules, but Exu's hasn't reached global yet, so I'll cover it briefly. It's an alright buff with her dealing more damage to aerial enemies, and her Angel's Blessing talent can now be used on 2 random allies, which I guess is good for flag pipe strats. The reason I was hesitant to put Exu on my original top 10 was because of the higher defense of enemies that made her fall out of favor, but the devs have eased up on the difficulty of event content lately, and even made bosses susceptible to her given the right conditions, including whatever the hell this thing is. In a vacuum, Exu isn't the best sniper. I know a lot of you are wondering why Exu should be mentioned when the new sharpshooter Poziomka just dropped, but I wanted to give this first spot to a legacy operator who still sees utility to this day, and don't worry, we'll address Pozi a little bit later. The next operator is one I alluded to at the end of my last video, and from what I expected, I didn't think he'd be this broken. Mountain is a brawler guard, meaning he fights like a JoJo's. Regarding skills, his second skill is your go-to with him, as Sweeping Stance does the following. When active, Mountain gets a 20% defense debuff, but in turn he receives an 80% attack buff, block +1, deals damage to all blocked enemies, and restores 7% of his max HP per second. What makes this skill insane is how fast it charges, as at M3, it only requires 5 SP to be ready, the same amount as Surtur's third skill. Now, let's see how much better he is with his talents, as first up is Forceful Fist. Okay. This gives Mountain a 20% chance to have his attacks deal 160% damage and reduce the target's attack by 15% for 3 seconds. The only downside to this skill is its inability to stack upon itself. His second skill is Sturdy Constitution. Okay, I know this game is filled with characters who have animalistic traits ranging from cute ears to straight up lizard men, but considering the previous talent's name, you can't be naming shit like this! I've seen what the internet will do, against my will, when you give them a buff furry man, especially when his Seiyu is the voice actor for Rora Noa Zoro. But yeah, his second talent just gives him a 10% buff to defense and 15% physical dodge, so even more sustainability. Mountain quickly became one of my most used operators ever since he released, and while part of that is due to me being a sucker for any Iberian and Colombian operators, his power is obvious. Mountain's strength is the equivalent of Surtur's, but for the early game. You have an operator who can hold a lane better than Blaze for half the DP cost, and has self-sustaining regen. Considering you can have him combat ready in 5 SP as opposed to Blaze's 70, he's insanely easy to use. This is a good example of Yostar taking a hard look at an underpowered archetype and reworking it, as they shifted the design of Mountain away from the dodge that brawlers were known for and focused more on the regen and stat capabilities he gets, showing the game's ability to make underpowered archetypes interesting and fun. Now that we're past furries, what's next? Scalies? Joke's on you, I play Fire Emblem, I'm into that shit. Lee's archetype is that of the merchant. No, he's not an investigator, but regardless, he's a DP drain specialist. As for his primary skill, we're going back to skill 3, as Honored Guest is fairly unique. Like Mountain skill, this one also has a short SP charge, only this skill is permanent. Although, why would you ever deactivate Mountain skill, but that's beside the point. When active, Lee has a 1-tile radius attack range, and any enemy that he is not attacking in said range gets slightly pushed with each attack. He also gets a taunt effect, as enemies will be more likely to target him, and that's a good thing considering he gets a 70% chance to dodge both physical and arts attacks from outside of his range, so better hope enemy true damage isn't coming anytime soon. On top of all this, Lee gets a flat 50% buff to both his attack and defense. While it sounds like Lee is good crowd control, his talents actually make him a bit more versatile. His first talent, Kindness Begets Prosperity, does the following. If Lee is blocking an enemy, said enemy gets their attack speed reduced while buffing Lee's by the same value. However, if there is only one enemy in Lee's attack range, the effect is doubled. So not only can Lee crowd control, but he's also great at soloing bosses and slowing them down. This is only enhanced by his second talent, Preparedness Averts Peril. Okay, I didn't read the story in his event because seeing Mr. Nothing return reduced my motivation to read his corny ass dialogue to nothing, so did I miss the part where he revealed himself as a butler? Anyways, this skill makes it so that the next time he drains DP, assuming you have enough, he will take 5 DP to block the next time he'd be stunned or frozen, and then stun the enemy back for 3 seconds. Well, if Lee can provide service this well, I can see why his fans are thirsty for his L2D and his snatched waist. Now, there's probably something diehard Lee fans are wondering about, and that's his module. Like I said, I didn't go into that depth for Exia because hers is only in CN at this point, but I can't make that excuse with Lee, so let's get into it. The initial buff gives him 200 HP and 55 attack, while also reducing his deployment time. By how much, I don't fucking know, thank you vague descriptions. Comments, you tell me please, I couldn't find anything on this. He's already a fast redeploy, so I'm pretty sure this will maybe affect one map in 2027. Anyways, the change people do care about is how his trait goes from taking 2 DP every 3 seconds instead of the standard 3, making him much more flexible to use and enabling him to show up earlier on maps. His level 2 upgrade makes his second talent stun enemies for 4 seconds while giving more stats, while his level 3 upgrade reduces the cost of his second talent to 4 DP instead of 5, and gives even more stats on top of that. While I don't think the level 3 upgrade is worth the steep cost, his level 2 does provide niche usage, but his module 1 is top priority if you're willing to dedicate the resources to M3 as third skill, and maybe his second skill for IS. If there's one thing Shonen has taught me, it's that 2 buff punchy men are better than 1, and I just find it funny that the sushi man got surpassed once the sushi started slapping back.
Hey honey, have you gained some weight in your rear end? The dress you wear reminds me of my old girlfriend. And where'd you get those shoes? I think they're pretty lame. Would you stop talking cause I'm trying to watch the game? If you're a man who wants to live a long and happy life, these are the things you don't say to your wife.
And that is why she is the ex-wife, and totally not because I left her for another cat girl. Kal'tsit is a single target medic, but if we're gonna talk about the other doctor of Rhodes Island, we need to talk about her spinal column monster, spelled like this for some reason, is a 10 cost 3 block summon that has stats so massive, you'd think this was a fan-made character, but no, this is as real as the Arknights Muse Dash collab. The one downside to Monster is that he takes up 2 deployment slots when summoned, but once you see what he can do, you'll understand why. The other thing worth noting about Monster is that if you deploy him outside of Kal'tsit's range, Monster will have 0 defense. The fact that he can be deployed outside of her range period only further adds to this behemoth's power, but if placed in her range, Kal'tsit will focus on healing both her and him, whatever, and if your operators are dying when in her range, they will stay dead. So with that abridged summary of her core gameplay, which is her first talent for some reason, let's get into the first skill we'll talk about, Command Tactical Coordination. When this skill is active, Monster gains 100 attack speed and a 90% attack buff, while also attacking all blocked enemies. Considering this skill lasts for 20 seconds and only has a charge of 8 SP, it's very spammable and lets you handle many waves of mooks. However, if you want boss clearing, that's when the command shifts to Meltdown. Meltdown gives Monster a 200% defense buff, 260% attack, which will gradually go to 0 over the skill's duration, and lets Monster deal true damage. If you somehow don't kill something with this skill, he loses 50% of his max HP at the end of it. This skill also lasts for 20 seconds, but has a steeper charge of 15 SP, which combo all this with her second talent, non-damaging restructuring, which makes it so that when Monster is defeated, all enemies in a 1-tile radius of his deployment take 1200 true damage and are stunned for 3 seconds. While the Arknights devs have been nerfing arts damage with Chapter 9 giving every generic grunt massive res, Kal'tsit doesn't struggle with them thanks to her true damage. Her second skill makes you wonder why we have operators in the first place, considering that chapter was able to be predominantly soloed by Kal'tsit. This type of domination is why she's comfortably on the list, as true damage will always be good no matter the enemy, and this is why you should never neglect your donkeys, kids. Seeing as how we just talked about one feline, it's on to the next as GG or Goldenglow is up. Goldenglow is a drone caster, and her drones scale the same way as other mechacord casters in terms of damage. However, her drones function just a little differently. To explain what I mean, I'm going to go over her first talent since I guess 6-star felines all have to be special. When the unit skill is active, her drones have a 10% chance to self-destruct when attacking, which will deal 300% of Goldenglow's attack as arts damage in a small area. Again, vague descriptions not telling me how big the actual range is. I'm gonna just say 1 tile radius and pretend I'm right. This is the main gimmick of GG, as she will constantly ramp up damage, mostly by nuking her drones and then sending out another one soon after to repeat the cycle. Now, while GG's second skill is a useful AFK skill, her main power is seen from her third skill, Crystalline Shine. That's a cute name. GG herself stops attacking, but in her stead summons 2 additional drones, which each gain an 80% attack buff, and her drones will now inflict slow for half a second. And the part that you know I love, these drones have global range. Oh, the skill lasts for 30 seconds too. The targeting for her drones prioritizes enemies closest to the objective, so not only is she a hairdresser, but she doubles as a plumber for fixing your leaks. On top of that is her second talent, Precise Redirection, which just ignores 15 res. What we have here is the first caster who finally rivals Aya Fiala in terms of power. While Aya remains a powerful nuke with her S3, I did neglect her second skill with some harsh language before. Okay, I know some people are apparently so lazy that they unironically M3 Aya's second skill. I just question whether these doctors eat paste. But now I can say that glue tastes fucking amazing. Goldenglow doesn't out DPS Aya, not without insane RNG at least, but the convenience she provides with her auto-targeting is something you can't deny. Like I said in my 5-star video when I was busy jerking off Talopsis, which is usually the opposite of how it goes, you know that I'm a sucker for global range, and while I'm still a proud K believer, I think cats and dogs can get along just fine here, especially if we're talking about the pink Corone. It's just a shame she seems to have mommy issues with how loving and doting her mother is. Never change, Namie. Never change. We truly love and appreciate all you've done for us. So, this would be the part where I open with a bad British accent, but I'm just gonna use Xenoblade voice clips out of context here instead.
Sorry? Who are you calling a spoon? The difference is, you're an asshole. What's nothing different? What about babies? You guys got any babies? Looks like we're doing this, G-Dog. Time to saddle up.
Victoria is home to some powerful operators, if Bagpipe was any indication, and now we've got a 6-star flag bearer on our hands. So, is Saileach better than Myrtle? No. Well, is she better than Elysium at least? So, Saileach has the same first skill as Elysium in Support Gamma, and they function the same. Where the difference between these two lie is in their talents. We know Elysium literally has sniper support since he cheapens all snipers by 2 deployment points and gives them an attack speed buff. So what does Saileach give instead? Well, her first talent, Unwavering Banner, has it so any enemies within a 1-tile radius of her banner lose attack speed while giving set amount to her allies. Okay, so what's the banner referring to? Well, in Saileach's second and third skills, she will yeet a banner. Are these skills any good? Well, considering I had to look up what the fuck the banner was referring to and I pulled her on her debut banner, no. I know I've said some wild things in past videos, but I'm not on nearly enough copium to believe that her third skill has any use outside of a Giga Brain max risk clear, and even then, you would just use Black Knight. So, with her first talent being as useful as having Runaway as an ability in Pokemon Colosseum, how about her second talent? Spiritual Influence has the next operator deployed after Saileach cost 2 less DP to deploy. That's it. There is no other ability.
Wait a minute!
Now you might be asking, doesn't Elysium's skill affect all snipers? To which I'd say, you are correct. So, Elysium is better if you use snipers, but Saileach is better when you don't? Well, technically yes, but the real utility comes in using both of these two with Myrtle and Bagpipe and If anything, being a 6-star actively hurts Saileach, since P6ing her is much harder for her than it would be for Elysium, and at the end of the day, Elysium would still be cheaper, but Saileach is a flag bearer, so she was virtually guaranteed to be good no matter what, even if Myrtle is still superior. While Saileach brought nothing new of value to her archetype, Horn is an operator with some unique mechanics for the Defender Knights line, mostly due to her being the first in her archetype. Horn is a fortress defender, meaning she attacks enemies at range, but even if an enemy manages to reach her, she still has 3 block and will switch to attacking said enemy. Now, all of Horn's skills are genuinely useful, as her skill 1 is a good auto, her second skill is a taste of her power before E2, but we're going to focus on her third skill for this video. Ultimate Line of Defense is an ironic title for this skill, considering this turns Horn into a ballistic missile launcher. She gains a 70% attack buff, and has her attack interval greatly reduced so that she's attacking every second instead of every 3. Now that's the base effect of this skill, but there's a unique mechanic that was introduced with Horn called
Overdrive.
The Overdrive effect activates halfway through the skill's duration, and since it lasts for 24 seconds, you get 12 seconds where Horn's attack buff doubles to 140%, but she gradually loses HP while this is active. Now, if you're worried about Horn dying, you can manually deactivate the skill, if you don't know how her talents work. Her first talent, Military Fortress, gives all defender operators, including herself of course, a 20% attack buff when she is deployed. Already useful, she gains over 200 attack with this when she's maxed out, but her E2 talent is what pushes her over the top. Bloodbath makes it so that instead of retreating when defeated, Horn will now resurrect with half of her max HP and gain an attack speed and defense buff. To put into layman's terms just how insane Horn's DPS is, you know how Aya Fiala is still a broken nuke? Well, Horn's third skill, which has about 1/3 of the SP cost, does more damage than Aya's third skill, before the attack speed buff. Now, does this mean I think she replaces Aya? Look, just because I put paste on the palette doesn't mean I've fully consumed it, I'm not a Nest main. But now you can add Defender Nuke to the list of operators that we have, and this puts us one step closer to Nuke Knights, which we are slowly approaching. Horn is just good DPS overall, and provides a unique archetype to the game, which has insane power that only scales with the later content we're going to see. There are only 3 operators left on the list, but I think this is a safe point to say that I have saved the best for last. The next 3 operators are actual top 10 units, and some might say these 3 are the new top 3 best operators in the game, and it's not surprising to see why. Let's go over the first of these broken operators, the first altar added to the game, Scotty the Corrupting Heart, aka Skalter. Skalter is the first 6-star bard added to the game, meaning she does not attack, nor does she really protect, but she will heal allies in her range by 10% of her attack each second. Now, Skalter's breakthrough skill is her second skill. I'm not gonna fucking read that. This skill takes 56 SP to charge, but once active, all allies in her attack range gain the Inspire status equal to 60% of her attack, and her healing is now doubled to 20% of her attack per second, and this skill has unlimited duration. So, what does the Inspire status do? This is a buff which gives an ally affected by it a flat buff to their attack and defense. This means that a max level Skalter will give any ally in her range over 250 attack and defense. And her range is pretty damn large. What makes this skill even more cracked is her talent, Ancient Kin, better known as a Seaborn. The talent lets Scotty deploy a Seaborn on any tile a regular operator can go on, and gives the same buff that Scotty provides to an ally in a 1-tile radius of the summon. Now, the Seaborn isn't permanent, but it lasts for 25 seconds and can be redeployed after another 25 pass. Her second talent is Niche, as Predatory Habits gives her a flat 6% buff, assuming you're using her properly, and if there's an Abyssal Hunter in her range, the buff gets jacked up to 15%. What can I say? More attack stacking is good. Now, there's a third skill which deals true damage to enemies with her and the Seaborn's range, and it gives a massive Inspire buff, but if you don't heal her at all, she'll retreat from the damage she takes with this skill. Deploying any operator in Skalter's range immediately bumps them up a tier just from the sheer stats they'll get, and the passive healing will make them sturdier than ever. Now, add all these buffs onto an already cracked operator, and it doesn't take long to see why she's an easy S+ operator. While Skalter took a mediocre operator and made her a fan favorite with her unique buffs, the next operators we're going over have a little bit of controversy. I'm not here to talk about that, as that's not the focus of this video, but we've got to talk about the OP Blue Women of Arknights, and we'll go in chronological release order. So next up is Chen the Halong Day, wow that is a bad name, aka Chalter, yet another limited alt of an existing operator. Chalter is a boomstick or spread shot sniper, meaning her range is a 2x3 grid in front of her, but you'll soon see why that doesn't matter, as her skill 3 is all you need unless you're doing auto knights. Holiday Storm does a lot. First, that range I mentioned, yeah, I lied. This is her range now, and she gets the following when this skill is active. First up, we get a 100% attack buff, and every attack she does now deals damage twice, or effectively gives her dual strike. Her trait now applies to all enemies in the blast range, referring to the 50% damage buff that any boomstick sniper gets whenever they hit an enemy in that first row. So yeah, that's just a flat 50% damage increase, and she leaves a field that lasts for 5 seconds, reducing the movement speed of all ground units in it by 45%, and erases 220 defense. Now, as for how the skill works, it might have a steep 55 SP charge, but its duration is 16 shots. Now, if that made absolutely no sense to you, let me explain how ammo works in this game. When she uses the skill, Chalter will get 32 ammo, and uses 2 ammo with each shot, which is how the dual strike activates. This means that Chalter will get 16 super shots effectively, at minimum. Her first talent, Frugality, gives her ammo skills a 20% chance to not consume ammo, while other snipers get a 10% chance to not use their ammo, so no horn cheese because Lord knows she doesn't need more DPS. Unless you get really bad RNG, you should be able to cheese out a few extra shots with this, but if you want to save her skill for another wave, you can also manually deactivate it and have it start charging early. Add her second talent, which is just a flat attack speed buff that gets strong on maps with water, aka event only ones, and maybe you don't understand why she's broken yet, so let me just spell it out with you in case you missed the numbers. To correct the mistake I made on my last video, I forgot to mention that Thorns' second use of Destreza doubles the buffs he gets, so a max level Thorns with his 741 attack, which gets a 120% attack buff and 50 attack speed, rounds out to about 1630 attack when using Destreza for the second time. Chalter has more than this. Chalter at max level has 773 attack, 853 with max trust. That we're just going to round down to 850 for easy numbers. Her skill buffs his attack to 1700. But on top of that, she also gets the boomstick buff, effectively giving her another 50% attack buff, which would mean her attack is tripled when her skill is active. As we nearly forgot to mention the 220 defense debuff on all enemies in range, which, by the way, did I mention that Chalter deals true AoE damage? Meaning it doesn't matter if there's 1 fucker or 10 in her range, as either way, they're all getting blasted. Twice.
I started blasting. Bang! Bang!
So, Chalter does like 6k physical damage per shot, but you might be wondering, is that really that big a deal when there's plenty of other operators like Silver Ash or Surtur whose massive bursts also deal crazy damage? Yes. Chalter can easily spam this skill from a safe distance and shred enemies with no real risk to her. If this sounds like insane power creep, that's because it is. But it's also peanuts compared to what's next. From one blue-haired baddie to the next, we have the sake-sipping summoner herself, Ling. Ling is a summoner who summons dragons that have different effects depending on which skill you use, which is her first talent. The skill that makes her so powerful is her third one. To remain oneself, you have to avoid using this skill, otherwise you get what happened to Contingency Contract. The skill has a manual trigger that lasts for 30 seconds, and it does the following. Ling and her summons will gain a 100% attack and defense buff, while each summon gets an AoE in 1 tile in each cardinal direction, which deals 20% of Ling's buffed attack as arts damage every half second. Once the skill ends, Ling gains another summon. Now, this sounds alright, we've seen crazier numbers on other operators on the list, but I think the numbers get bonkers once I show you the stats of the Thunderer, as they're called. This is the base dragon form. It has Mudrock levels of health, 20 resistance, and even better attack than Blaze, with a block 2 body that only costs 23 DP and can be deployed every 20 seconds. Now, the cracked part is that Ling secretly plays Yu-Gi-Oh! And plays by OCG rules, meaning that once she activates polymerization by deploying another Thunder Dragon into the range of a previous one deployed, she can fuse them together to make the Thunder Dragon Colossus, which is the name I want all of you to spread for this behemoth, because it's about as broken as this card is in Yu-Gi-Oh! Keep these stats in mind while I read her second talent. When a summon is defeated / absorbed / retrieved, game's language not mine, Ling gains 3 SP and attack plus 3%. This talent can stack up to 5 times. This means that if you use her properly, Ling can gain a 15% attack buff, which translates into more damage over time from the dragon. Now, as if Ling wasn't already powerful enough, she got a module on launch because she clearly needed it. Ling's first module upgrade gives her the ability to hold 3 additional summons and reduces their deployment cost. For our dragon buddy here, his cost dips by 5 down to 18, a mandatory upgrade for any dedicated Ling user, as she can set up the field faster in addition to the stat she gets, which is 100 HP and 30 attack, only further increasing the damage the dragons will deal. Her level 2 gives her better stats and the ability to deploy 4 summons at once now. Her level 3 upgrade not only gives Ling herself a stat buff, but also her summons get stronger too, with the dragons getting more HP and attack because, you know, they clearly needed it. Now, while Chen go burr, Ling has you meticulously manage resources to set up a nigh unkillable board, or as I like to call it, the result of setting up Omnimon X Antibody in the Digimon TCG. Yes, there's a Digimon TCG, and the set next month has waifu-powered decks. Trust me, it's fun. Ling gives you several bodies who can get buffed to ludicrous numbers far beyond what any other operator is capable of, and is one of the few operators who can deal both physical and arts damage, and I haven't really addressed it until now, but she's one of the easiest sources of block 4 in the game. Once again, I'm not here to talk about the impact Ling had on Arknights as a whole, being another stupidly overpowered limited operator with long blue hair and big blue. However, Ling is the most powerful operator in the game at the time of making this video, but that's not the case in CN at this point. That doesn't change the fact that she set thousands of records for clearing maps, including many easy solo clears, as I don't think it would be an understatement to say that Ling represented a problem. She didn't need to be this cracked, as we had Lee, who was already a powerful operator who was worth pulling for. Did the devs not learn anything from the horrible reaction that caused Chen, one of their most popular operators, to fall off and anger thousands of her loyal fans? Well, I think what we have next shows you how they addressed this issue.
そこでドゥリンの民は自由気ままに暮らしていた。悪夢の日が訪れるまでは。空が崩れ、地下水が流れ込み、町が濁流に飲まれ、子供たちの泣き叫ぶ声が反響した。災いは終わらず、ドゥリンたちは恐怖と絶望の中でもがいている。彼らを運命から救い出せるもの、それはあんただ。
これがお前の言う薬剤か。
Gavial the Invincible is a Centurion Guard, or the same archetype as Blaze, meaning that she uses Chainsaw, and she has multiple useful skills. Her first skill gives her a flat attack buff and heals her for the damage she dealt. Her second skill expands her range, massively buffs her attack, also buffs her defense, and pulls in unblocked enemies. Her third skill is a powerful burst that helps you mitigate damage. All of these are genuinely useful skills, but just like Blaze, you're gonna want to focus on her second skill. Chainsaw Assault is a skill that lasts for 40 seconds and does the following on trigger. Gavial will adopt the range of a spread shot sniper, get a 180% buff to her attack, 50% to her defense, and when attacking unblocked enemies, she will pull them towards her with moderate force, meaning anything that has a weight of 2 or lower is getting the big suck. It's a fairly simple skill, but her talents make it even stronger. Battle Axe gives Gavial a flat 10% buff to both her attack and defense, but she gets another 4% buff stack for each enemy she's blocking, so as she pulls in more enemies with this skill, she'll be able to keep her stats up. Her second skill is Medical Background, which increases the potency of all healing she receives by 20%, but said effect gets doubled to 40% when she's under half health. These skills synergize better with her third skill, which is also good, and I've already upgraded it myself personally, but there's a reason why her second skill is being hyped up so much when her third skill looks better at first glance, since it does give Gavial a 5 block count and damage mitigation. That's because we're looking ahead to Uncle Mjolnir. Okay, I don't speak Horse, so I have no clue how you actually pronounce his name. Please correct me, comments. Basically, his third skill and Gavalter's second skill are able to activate perfectly in each other's downtime, ensuring that you have powerful bursts perpetually active. The Great Axe and Pendant banner is one of the best banners to pull for when you take into account the fact that Poziomka, told you would be coming back to her, is another cracked operator worth pulling for, and in all honesty, is better than Gavial, but I have given you all enough content for the video as I put 11 operators into a top 10 video. Poziomka's cracked, not limited, absolutely worth getting, and whichever one of these bad bitches you get, you're gonna walk away a happy doctor. So, seeing as how I had to drain my sanity, take 3 emergency potions, and pop some OP to get this video done in a timely manner, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've really missed doing Arknights content, so I'm glad to be able to talk about a bunch of new operators that released since my last video. Comments, I trust you guys will correct the inevitable mistakes I've made in this video, and if you liked it enough, please comment on your favorite operators below, and let me know who you think I should have mentioned, but make sure you watch my original video to see if maybe I mentioned any classic operators there. If this video does well enough, I might do a true top 10 or some form of ranking for the limited operators if you guys like. Anyways, I'm gonna go enjoy that Gavial event story that I had to skip to farm while I was editing this, so hope to see you guys next time. Peace.